Hey
This
guys.
meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Hey guys. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Next Man Up podcast. Today is February 13th, 2023, and I'm your co-host Banning and Colin, and we have Colin Martin with us today.
Hey guys, it's the 14th. It's Valentine's Day.
Yeah. All right. Just making sure everyone was paying attention. So let's get right into this. First thing we got to talk about is the Super Bowl that happened this weekend. The Kansas City Chiefs beating the Philadelphia Eagles 38-35 in a very good game. Probably one of the best Super Bowls that we've seen in a while. We've had some not great ones over the past 10 years. Some games like the Patriots Rams wasn't that exciting, but there were some good games. Last year was pretty good, but let's talk about this one. First thing we got to talk about, obviously, is the thing that's on everyone's mind right now, the holding call. So I'll let you start with that. What you think about this.
Yeah, so I'm joining you live from Philadelphia right now. We have the city burning in the background. I think the first thing I want to say is I think a lot of, we come on here, we're a podcast. We like to talk about football. We like to pretend that we're smarter than everybody else. But we're not the only people that like to do that. There's a lot of people on the internet that like to do the same thing. And I think I know football, that kind of guy, his take happened to be a lot of it wasn't a catchable ball, so it shouldn't have been a flag. At the end of the day, if you really know football, a defensive holding call does not have to be on a catchable ball. So I think the call was correct. I think what I would, argue more is you got to let that play out. That didn't affect that play. And it's the Super Bowl, and it would get the Eagles back on the field. I can't be mad at the official for making the call because it is the correct call. But I think just for the sake of being a fan, I would have liked to see that one go and see the Eagles get another drive just because of how great the game was going. So I guess that's my opinion on the exact play. You're shaking your head. What do you guys say?
He said in the end of the game, I held him. So we don't go at the beginning of the game and say they can't throw the flag there. There's 60 minutes of football. If there's a flag, you got to throw the flag. I don't care when it is. Maybe he shouldn't have held him and lost the game for them. It's his fault. He literally went backstage or wherever they did it and he's like, yeah, I held him. So 2 years in a row, former Giants cornerbacks blowing their team's chances in the Super Bowl. You love to see it as a Giants fan. You love to see the Eagles lose. They did play a very good game, obviously. Jalen Hurts, first quarterback to have 3 rushing touchdowns in a Super Bowl. He's a running back, but I guess he plays quarterback. Both quarterbacks injured going into this game. Mahomes looked a little more injured at one point, especially at halftime before they gave him the PEDs. But then he came out in the second half, busted a 30-yard run, but he is looking fine. There were some murmurs at halftime. Oh, Chad Henne's going to go in. It's the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes is going to play the game. He just gave the Eagles a chance at halftime to go up by 10 because he knew he was going to win. You can't come back if you're never down.
Now though, Mahomes, we can stop talking about Mahomes for 2 seconds because you're done talking. I will say, it was a great Super Bowl. Mahomes had, I wouldn't say the game of his life, but I think with the scenario, one of his best games ever. Like, you're not going to look at his stats and be, necessarily shocked and say this was his best game ever. But in the scenario, it's big time. And, while being down at halftime and while being injured, he did everything you could. And, I got to give some credit to Andy Reid, coaching against his former team. That game plan in the second half was unbelievable. It wasn't even that the Eagles were playing that bad defense. Their defense wasn't good in the second half, don't get me wrong, but they were just so out-schemed. It didn't even look fair at times. That whip route to give them the lead late in the fourth quarter on the right side, and then pretty much the same play with a swing route on the left side, there was nobody even within 5 yards of the players wide open in the end zone in the Super Bowl. That comes down to scheme. It also comes down to, Patrick Mahomes and the players around him, Kelsey, McKinnon, Juju, those guys have to make the plays. But when it's schemed that open, you got to give credit where it's due to the coach. And then with that being said, one thing, I think, we're a little late to the party. We record weekly. So, I'm sure, you've heard enough about the game by now. one interesting thing that I want to look forward to in the offseason when it comes to the rules is there used to be a rule where you couldn't push the quarterback on a QB sneak in the NFL,
Yeah.
really college, and that rule has been tweaked, and that rule change was abused. I mean, I give credit to the Eagles because it worked every single time, but I think it might not be the best for the game if whenever there's a 4th and inches, you're going to run a QB sneak and just have like your 5 biggest dudes push the quarterback forward. I think there's something to be said for that rule. And, maybe we can look out for that in the offseason. But I think in general terms, it was a great game.
Yeah. Obviously, we see that in college all the time. They continue the play until the player is pretty much on the ground. But the Eagles use that all year long. We even saw at one point, 4th and 2, Chris Jones finally had enough. He's like, okay, I'm going to jump over the top, grabs Jalen Hurts, stops him for a half second, and then the 8 other guys just push him forward. There's no stopping that. And
what happens when you can squat 600?
Yep, I heard a lot of that during the game.
Yep.
Yeah, obviously he can't throw 600 either because he only threw like 35 yards on the last ball, but that's okay. Jalen Hurts had a very good game. Very interesting game plan, though, from a running back standpoint. They have 3 running backs who I think Miles Sanders is the best running back, but I think Sirianni just he just wanted a bunch of different guys on the field at one point. They didn't have a strong running game besides Jalen Hurts in that game. They didn't really need one. Hurts was making all the throws he needed to. A lot of good plays like that. And we almost saw Nick Bolton win Super Bowl MVP. If that play happened, he had 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. He could have been the MVP.
One thing I want to say about that, and I think you made a great point that I just really want to touch on. Sure, you don't need a running game in a game. They put up 35 points. Like, it's not like that was a problem. Mm-hmm. But in the second half, when you have a lead and you have the ball, having a running game is great. Like, instead of having a 3 and out that takes less than a minute and gives, Andy Reid and the Chiefs the ball right away, a running game stretches that out, It almost, like, in the second half, I feel like there wasn't even any urgency from the Chiefs. Like, they knew they were going to win the game because they had time. If the Eagles were able to, get yards while draining that clock, it's a whole different game. So, Jalen Hurts had a great game, but I really wish Sirianni used, his good running backs more. And, like, that would have, I don't know, that could have been a Super Bowl victory if something like that happened. That's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, looking at it right now, Kenneth Gainwell, second in rushing yards behind Jalen Hurts, 21 yards. Sanders with 16 yards and Boston Scott with 8. And Gainwell and Sanders both ran 7 times each. So Jalen Hurts, though, had 15 carries. The rest of the running backs had 17 combined. So, when you have a quarterback that can run, you got to use it too. Devontae Smith had an amazing game. A.J. Brown getting doubled with a high safety for most of the game. They made Smith beat him, and he had a great game. Another breakout guy, Isaiah Pacheco. We talked about him a little bit last week, just having a great game. And then 2 guys who pretty much caught the game-winning touchdowns for the Chiefs. Kadarius Toney, who had the longest punt return, almost for a touchdown in the Super Bowl. And then you had Sky Moore, 2 guys who barely did anything this year. Obviously, Toney was only there for half the season, but Sky Moore really only returned kicks this year. And then he comes up with essentially the game-winning touchdown for them.
Yeah.
So obviously, good game for both of them.
One last thing on that. Pacheco, having a 7th-round draft pick out of Rutgers be your guy in the Super Bowl, especially after taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire so early in years past, I think it just shows, how replaceable running back can be and how, you just got to be ready when the moment's right. So I give a lot of credit to Pacheco on that. He was ready this year, right now, and he's a Super Bowl champ because of it.
So next thing I want to talk about, does this officially make the Chiefs a dynasty? 5 AFC championships in a row, 3 Super Bowl appearances, 2 Super Bowl wins.
My answer, it's so funny because I have a totally different answer written down, but as we talk about it, yes, they have to be a dynasty. The thing is, I think, and I'm biased, but I think the years we saw of the Patriots have shifted our view of what a dynasty is, almost because they were like so ridiculous at being a dynasty. But in general terms, I mean, we look back at like, the 90s Cowboys, the 80s Raiders and Steelers, stuff like this. The 2020s and late 2010s Chiefs are, that's a team we're going to be looking back on, and it's not like they're just getting to the AFC Championship and flopping. They're making Super Bowls, they're winning them. They have the best player that we've seen in the last, at least 5 years. You can stretch that a little farther back. They have all the makings of a dynasty, and they're coming off a Super Bowl win. They're a dynasty. How do you feel about that?
I mean, in my opinion, I think Patrick Mahomes summed it up perfectly at the end of the game. He was asked this exact question. He said, "We're not a dynasty because we're not done yet." And I like that answer. I don't think they're done yet. And for a guy like him, who obviously we'll get into it right now, he's on a pretty good pace for the GOAT debate. One guy that I saw the other day, Uncle Shannon, goes on TV wearing the GOAT mask. Skip Bayless, not a big fan of that. But the first 5 years of a career right now are looking very good for Mahomes. He's 2 MVPs, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. There's only been 3 quarterbacks who have won 2 MVPs and 2 Super Bowl MVPs. He's done it now in his 5th season as a starter. It took Brady 11 years, Montana 12 years. And he's only the 7th player to win MVP and Super Bowl MVP in the same year. First player since Kurt Warner in '99. And it was kind of a curse because, I mean, that's a long time for it happening. And we saw a lot of players win MVP and then go to the Super Bowl. They just lost. 5th most passing yards in his first 5 seasons starting. He's only 1,600 passing yards from Peyton. He played 17 less games. That's pretty much like a full season. And, I mean, based on his averages, that could have been like another 4,000 yards. And he's 2nd in most passing touchdowns in his first 5 seasons starting, and 8 less games behind Dan Marino. So pretty elite company he's in right now.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that, I think, I'm not going to call him the GOAT right now. I don't think a lot of people would expect me to. To be fair, I got the Brady bias. But with that being said, he's the only one in the league right now that has a chance. And his chances are looking pretty good. Like your comment, and I guess his comment that you reiterated on the dynasty, they're not done yet. Mahomes is just so far from it. I'm not going to say he's not the GOAT right now, but I'm not going to be one of those dudes that says it could never happen or it's never going to happen. If this Chiefs dynasty continues like he says it will, and it's looking pretty good too, then yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, a big debate right now. Would you say he's top 3 all time right now?
This seems crazy, and I might need to look back at it right now, but I think generally in my head, I'd have to place him at 4th. And that's just because, there's Brady, there's Montana, there's Manning, and then there's Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you're going to get into the nitty gritty, we're getting really close to a point where you could try to slide Mahomes in over Montana. And I wouldn't be too mad. But for me right now, no, he'd still be my 4th. Where do you have him?
It's tough because this is the best quarterback I've ever seen play in my life. He can do anything you want him to. And he has the same amount of Super Bowls now as Peyton Manning. I don't think he's better, but if he keeps this true, even if he doesn't win another Super Bowl in his career, and because I think he's going to win a few more MVPs, but if he has the same amount of MVPs and Super Bowl rings as Manning, I think he'll pass him. Obviously, with counting stats, if he's putting up 5,000 yards a season, there's not going to be anyone close. He's going to be like, if he plays, he's not going to play as long as Brady, but a guy like him, if he plays 15 to 18 years, maybe those passing yards, he could be like, he'll probably be at like LeBron level. They'll both be just so high up, but it could be passed, obviously, now that we have the passing offense coming in. But I think right now I have him top 5. If he wins a Super Bowl next year, then I think I just have to have him top 3. But it's going to be hard. I know he played Brady in the Super Bowl, so there's always going to be that, because we never obviously saw Jordan and LeBron play in the finals, but there's always going to be that Mahomes couldn't beat Brady in the one Super Bowl they played against each other. However you look at it, even though he had a good game, but that'll always be there, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of close that one out, I think the difference between, and as you were saying, the difference between a Jordan and LeBron debate and a future Mahomes and Brady debate is there's not that generational gap. Like, yes, Tom Brady was old when Mahomes was a rookie, but Tom Brady was old when Mahomes was a rookie, but we saw Tom Brady perform and play some of his best seasons while Mahomes was in the league, which is just
Yeah.
not something we saw from Jordan and LeBron. Jordan just had his last year on the Wizards, and, LeBron was 18, So it's
Yeah.
slightly different there. We're going to have, these head-to-head games, a Super Bowl, and then we're going to have, like seasons where they coexisted, which just makes a difference. So, we're obviously a long way from, acknowledging if Mahomes is the GOAT or not, but he's a lot closer than I think anyone would have expected him to be.
Yeah. Obviously we saw Brady and Mahomes in Mahomes' first season, that offside call, big call. Obviously, that could have changed a lot of trajectory for Mahomes too. And then the Super Bowl too. Like you said, we never got to see. Jordan was he was like $400 million in debt gambling while LeBron was getting drafted first overall at that point. So I guess we'll move on to the award recap. Just to go through it real quick, we have Mahomes at MVP, Justin Jefferson, Offensive Player of the Year, Nick Bosa, Defensive Player of the Year, Garrett Wilson, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Hutchinson, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Geno Smith, Comeback Player of the Year, and Dable, Coach of the Year. If there's any of these you want to talk about real quick.
Yeah. One thing I was looking at is that we have a slight typo in here because Sauce Gardner got the Defensive Rookie of the Year. But
he did? Okay.
Yeah. And no big deal. I mean, Hutch was right up there. But I mean, with that being said, and I think that almost even leads into my point, just like a small mistake because a lot of these were so close. But, I think the NFL had, they had a bunch of I think the candidates were perfectly picked, I guess is the way I would like to word that. And so none of these picks really surprised me or I think are even bad. I mean, these are all picks that either you or I said last episode. And, it's just respectable, although maybe I might not have the same pick, like Dable is much deserving of the Coach of the Year. Bosa has the counting stats for Defensive Player of the Year. Garrett Wilson, once again, one of the better receivers in the league this year as a rookie. Then all the rest of them are just like stuff I agree with. I don't think there's any super hot takes or anyone that's undeserving. Sure, maybe I would change one or two, but I think the NFL did it right this year, which is not something that I usually say. So I'm all for it.
I was looking at they came out a few days before and they gave Hutchinson the NFL, I think it was the Pepsi NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year. So I got a little confused on that. But both of us said, I think both of us both had these picks or one of us had one of the picks. So I don't think there's any that we really disagreed too much on.
If you combined both of our picks, we had all these guys.
So I think a good award season for the NFL, getting, I would say, pretty much all the picks right. I don't really. The only one that I don't know how I feel about is the Defensive Player of the Year. But obviously, Bosa does have the counting stats over a guy like Parsons. But I'm not upset about that. But I guess we can move into the draft. This is kind of the start of the draft season. Usually, as a Giants fan, the week 1 is the start of the draft season, but not this year. So, but I have been keeping a close eye on it, obviously. So as we start just the first week of it, we'll go over a few of the quarterbacks that we like in the draft. And obviously, as we progress, we'll go down some more position groups and kind of big boards and stuff. But just to start, quarterbacks are the big names. So if there's a few guys that you want to talk about, obviously we have kind of a big 3 this year. Not like all first round. Well, I guess depends on who you ask first round, but the 3 main guys that we can talk about. Yeah.
So, I mean, these 3 main guys, I think we have to categorize it that way just because that's what everybody's talking about. But, as I'll talk about more as I get a little deeper into this, those are not my top 3 quarterback prospects by any means. But I think straight into the first one that, is probably going to be on the top of most people's boards. And we can go back and forth on this. Bryce Young is who is going to be at the top of a lot of people's lists. Bryce Young, he's a big name. I'm sure you've heard of him by now, former Heisman winner. But I think I put some, big categorizing words next to each player. Bryce Young, I had game changer, accurate, and small. Because, as you know, if you've dug into the draft at all, Bryce Young isn't just short. He's not just Tyler Murray. He is skinny. Like you can tell on the field that he is small. He's not just short, I guess is the easiest way to put it. And some comparisons I have for him, if you're trying to relate it to, players you're more familiar with, I do a high comparison, a low comparison. My high comparison for Bryce Young would be a guy like Drew Brees. Drew Brees was not very big at all, but he was accurate, and he led the Saints, almost on his own to so much success in the NFC. And then a low comparison I have for him is actually a former teammate of his, Tua Tagovailoa. I think Tua is a really good quarterback. I'm personally a big fan of him. But as we've seen, with this last year in particular, when you are not very big and you take hit after hit, you're not going to be available. And the best ability for any quarterback is availability. So that is one thing where, if I'm, an NFL GM and I am worried about, Bryce Young's ability to stay on the field, I'd look at Tua as an example. I'd like to hear your thoughts on Bryce Young.
I think obviously the main debate right now, I guess, is between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud as the top guy. I think Bryce Young is a lot better than him. Obviously, like you said, he's a little smaller, and I guess that can be a concern in the NFL now, but I think he's the top guy. I don't think he's one of the best prospects we've seen in a while, but I think he's definitely the number one guy in this class, even compared to the class last year and then the class next year. I think this is kind of a lower tier quarterback class, but we've just had so many good prospects come out in the past few years, especially with the rise of the passing and RPO offenses in college. It's so hard not to have just so much talent out there. And then the number two guy, like I was just talking about, CJ Stroud. I think he's good, but I don't think he's as good as Bryce Young. Obviously, he played at Ohio State with some great receivers, and especially within the past 3 years, we've seen some of the best receiving prospects in a while come out of there too. And I think he's good, but he's not my favorite in this class. Your thoughts about him?
I would say CJ Stroud kind of confuses me, if I'm being honest, more than almost any of these other prospects. He feels safe, but there's not really a good reason behind that, if I can be honest. When you look at his build and the way he almost like his arm progression while throwing the football, you see him and you go, wow, that's like Joe Burrow. Like he's got this very similar physicals. He was in, I wouldn't say LSU and Ohio State were, the most similar systems, but I mean, Joe Burrow used to play at Ohio State. They have gone through similar coaching. And although maybe, less success, they both succeeded very well in the college game. But my problem with him is that, I think when you list good things about CJ Stroud, physicals are one of them. But then you look at CJ Stroud football and he's scared to move. He almost turns into a statue in the pocket sometimes. And I don't think that's necessarily a deal breaker because it's something that can be coached. But, we see him explode against UGA because he's willing to move and he's making plays outside of the pocket. But it's not something we saw almost his whole career, even coming through like his earliest tape in high school. He's accurate, he can throw, but he's not a mover or a shaker or anything like that. So I think, it's almost hard to project. Is he going to be one of those guys that can move in the NFL or not? Because depending on how you feel about that, totally changes where CJ Stroud should be on your board. Mm-hmm. And then I'm assuming the third guy we're going to talk about is Will Levis. Will Levis, personally for me, and, I'm not going to get too crazy here, but I compare him a lot to how I looked at Mac Jones in the QB class a couple of years back. There are going to be teams that have him as number one on their draft board, and he's going to be picked early in the first round, whether I agree with it or not. And, I'm going to try to be a little bit nice here. Personally, he's my fifth quarterback on my board, if I'm talking about who I think is the best. But it's undeniable that he has tools that would make him a top tier quarterback. If a team is willing to take a chance on him and maybe not start him day one, if a team that picks early on, like the Seahawks or the Lions, wants to take a flyer on him, I can't be mad because, teams are going to look at him and see Josh Allen. That's the comparison that you're going to hear from right now today until the day of the draft. People want Josh Allen. Me personally, I think he's more raw than even Josh Allen was. And he was playing in a system that was a lot more NFL friendly than Josh Allen was. I think we can attribute a lot of Josh Allen's early mistakes to him playing at Wyoming. And, Will Levis was in Kentucky. I know with a new offensive coordinator, different play calling, it might not have been the best situation for him, but he doesn't give me that same spark that I saw with Josh. I'd like to hear your perspective on this because he's polarizing.
Yeah, I mean, my comparison for him is Josh Allen. I think he's a guy where he's raw. And I mean, a guy like Josh Allen was still pretty raw and pretty bad in his first 2 years in the NFL.
Horrible.
And I would attribute a lot of his growth, obviously, to his work. But he was put the guys that they brought in, Brian Daboll, one of the big guys for him, that just helped him kind of hone that arm that he has, because you can be a quarterback with a really strong arm and you can throw deep routes. But if you can't hit a guy that's 10 yards standing in front of you, no one cares about your 80-yard throw. And Will Levis can't throw that far, obviously, but I think he's not my favorite quarterback in this class. And if you're comparing two raw quarterbacks, a guy like him and a guy like Anthony Richardson, I think Richardson, I would take him any day, especially if you're going into this saying this guy's going to be a project. I'm taking the project that has a higher upside. And I mean, another thing about a guy like Will Levis, he couldn't beat out Sean Clifford. And I think that says a lot about him. And if you can't beat out Sean Clifford, then I'm not taking you in the draft in the first round. I'll take you in the second round, but
I think, yeah, I mean, we can move on from this pretty soon. I mean, we're going to be talking draft for the next couple months, but I would like to throw out my 2 cents on Anthony Richardson. I really, really like him. Like, I'm on the Anthony Richardson bandwagon, and this is one of those takes where I make it and I know it's going to age really great or really poorly because he's the definition of hit or miss. Some people look at him and see Jamarcus Russell. I look at him and see Cam Newton, like prime Panthers Cam Newton. It's not even just, that, he's a big guy that can run. He moves and has, this outside of the pocket awareness like Cam Newton. But I think people see Jamarcus Russell when they see inside the pocket panicking, an occasional misread, even an occasional misthrow. He's far from the perfect prospect, but I have a lot of faith in Anthony. And then, just Hendon Hooker is my guy. I have a lot of bias. He's super old, so that kind of screws with him as a prospect. But when it comes to actually playing football, he is one of the most solid guys on the list.
Yeah. I think we pretty much went over that. We'll go over a lot more of this in the future. There's definitely going to be a lot of draft content. But this Anthony Richardson pick could be your Zach Wilson pick for me from a few years ago. But yeah, I really like him, so I agree with you on that.
Hey, what do we say when we play blackjack? Captain goes down with the ship. Come on.
Exactly. So we're going to go into probably one of the best segments of the year, in my opinion. We've done this in a former podcast that we did, the All-Star Draft. And I'll be Mr. LeBron James, greatest of all time, and you can be Giannis.
Man, I'm so hyped. I'm not going to lie. This is by far the most excited I've been for a segment we've had so far. I got the mock-up ready. Instagram is going to get, the summary and the wrap-up as soon as this episode drops. I got my strategy on my notes app, so I'm going to be looking a little bit to the right here. But, I'm hyped. But, I mean, you're Mr. LeBron, GOAT, whatever. You have the first overall pick, and we can get right into it.
So we've seen a little bit of shakeup with some injuries and stuff like that. And just to start this off, there's no positions or anything. You can draft whatever you want. I'll have the first pick of the first round. You have the first pick of the reserves. So with my first pick, that being said, I'm going to take – ooh, this is tough. Going into this, I'm just looking at the board. I'm just playing. This is backyard basketball.
Banning, I was sitting in the studio looking at who I think you were going to pick so I could figure out who I'm going to pick. I'm in your head right now. If I get it wrong, I got to change my whole strategy.
So with LeBron obviously being one of the players in the team, with my first overall pick, this is tough. All the good players are hurt. I'll take Embiid with my first pick.
Banning, I'm not going to lie to you. That is you. I'm already out of your head. That's not where I had you going for the first overall pick. All right. So
That's
I'm
good.
gonna have to pivot quick. That is, so I think I'm ready. I think with my first overall pick for the starters, second overall in the terms of the draft, I'm gonna take Luka Doncic.
Okay. Were you thinking I was going to go with him first?
That is who I had you mocked at going first for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I knew that you thought I was going to pick that. So then I'm
So
like,
now you're in
nah,
my head in my attempts to be in your head.
I'm just picking. I'm not even.
This is what you find in Next Man Up Sports, people.
I'm just. I mean, they're picking right before the game. I'm picking right before the game too.
Hey, all right.
So with my second pick, we got LeBron. We got Embiid, who's going to guard Giannis, so I don't have to worry about that. And you got Luka, so I mean, we're not playing defense, so I'm not worried about that. So I think, with my second pick overall, I'm going to take Jokic.
It's a great pick.
We're building the biggest lineup of all time.
Yep, to no surprise, that's where I was planning on going next. So once again,
can't get your guy.
Once again, we're gonna need to pivot a little bit. Banning. I'm not gonna lie, I expected you to let me get Jokic at some point because I know.
Yeah, you didn't think you know that I wasn't gonna pick Jokic.
Yeah. So I mean, this was my original. I had a crazy strategy going in. And this guy I'm about to pick was going to be my number one pick, even though he's definitely not the best player, out of all the guys on the board. But I'm going to secure him anyways. I kind of need him on my team at this point. I'm going to take Jason Tatum.
Okay.
I really thought that you were going to take Luka first. I was going to take Tatum, and then we were going to take each of our centers. But, we kind of had to flip the game on its head. So I'm going to take Tatum now, a little later than I thought I would have to.
Yeah, I got both of the centers, so
yeah,
we'll see what happens with that. We got both of the centers. We got LeBron at small forward, and
a bunch of guards on the board.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess you still have Lauri Markkanen that you can take, so that's okay.
You could also take him.
No, I'm okay. I'll pass. We want some highlights from this. So I'm going to take Ja Morant.
Yep. Great pick right there. Yeah, if you didn't, I would have. So, looking at the board, we're already all out of my strategy right now. I'm looking at my team. I'm looking at yours. If I'm being honest with you, this might not have been the guy you would pick. Maybe it would have been. I just can't let you get him in good faith. I'm going to take Kyrie.
Okay. I mean, I'm picking for me and you right now.
Yeah, you are. So there's an attempt to do something crazy here. I can see it brewing.
No, I'll let you keep Lauri Markkanen, and I'll take Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I think as much as I wanted to, do something crazy, or you wanted to do something crazy, you had the reins on that. You get your guard to fill it out. I get my forward to fill it out. We both have.
Yeah, I don't need Lauri Markkanen on my team. That's okay. No disrespect, but I don't need anyone from out there, out west.
Hey, no disrespect intended. The All-Star game is in Utah. I'll take the dude from Utah. Donovan Mitchell was the correct pick for you, but
yeah. And Markkanen's what, like a 6'3" guard or something like that?
Nah, we'll get another forward. We're gonna have Giannis run the center, which is that's gonna be something, but we'll figure it out.
Hey, well, take someone right now. This is your chance.
Yeah, but I can't swing him to the starter. We got the starters all figured out. So with that being said, I'm not the coach here. I can't be moving around starters and bench warmers.
Bench mob.
Bench mob. I'm going to be taking my personal favorite and, I think the best player from the bench section to run my one off the bench. I'm going to take Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
That's a good pick. I like that pick. Let's see. What centers can I take? I don't have any yet.
Loading up.
This is
I like the big men down here on the bench squad. You know, these guys will figure it out for me.
Yeah, like I said, we're going for highlights. So I want a guy who is going to make 5 half-court shots in this game. Give me Damian Lillard.
It's a great pick. If it wasn't Shea, I was going for him. All right, so now I'm looking at my team. You know, there's some, you know, there's a lot of decisions here. We get to a point where, you know, this is really up to personal preference. You know, I'm going to admit my bias a little bit. He might be hurt, so, you know, we might have to swap this out at some point later. I'm going to take the masked man. I'm going to take Jaylen Brown.
That's a good pick. I like that pick. I was actually thinking about taking him next. A guy who is the best player on his team and on the bench, and his teammate is a starter. I don't know about all that.
Bench players talking like starters. I hate it.
So we're going to need some more highlights. So give me Anthony Edwards.
Yeah. See, I had him lower down on my board. I knew he'd be higher on yours. It's an all-star game at the end of the day. You got to have some fun with it. For me, it's about damn time. I got to take my first center. It's been a while. And I'm going to take someone actually listed as a center. You know, he's been the best player on his team this year, even though his team's been disappointing. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I'm going to take Bam Adebayo.
Bam Adebayo.
Out of the bio.
Right, Adebayo onto your team. So I don't have a board, but I know there's a guy that's on your board. Your guy is on my team. Give me Tyrese Halliburton. I was going to take him first with the reserves just to mess you up. But
I thought I had one more round. I thought, again, screwing with my projections, I thought I had one more round for him to last. Oh, man, that's going to hurt. That really takes a toll. So I'm going to have to
took
pivot.
2 centers in the starters.
I'm going to have to pivot, and I do not like doing this. I think, you know, you've been going highlights. I think, you know, I got some guys on my squad, but I really got to start going for some fan favorites. I got to start going for the guys that have been here. They've had some crazy all-star games before, and they know how to rock. I'm going to take Paul George.
Ooh, okay. Thought you were going with Drew Holiday there.
I don't need a guy that was 10 years ago this early. I love Drew, but I don't need him right now.
Okay. So, what do we go with next? We're in a tough spot right now.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the rest of the guys, and I'm going to take the defensive player of the year, Jaren Jackson Jr., Mr. Opposite of empty stats.
I wonder if they're going to give him fake blocks in the All-Star game too.
Well, we'll see.
All right. In all seriousness, that's a good pick. Right here, I'm looking at the board. I think, you know, it's the bench. So we're going to have some, you know, repeat positions. These guys aren't all going to be running on the court at the same time. So I got to take a guy who's, you know, he's had a great year. It's about time he's in the All-Star game. You know, I think this was his year the whole time. He's on probably the most surprising team in the West. His teammates also here, but, you know, maybe my guard bias is kicking in, and I'm going to take De'Aaron Fox.
Oh.
I know.
It's not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were taking my next pick.
I have a feeling this was going to be yours. I think it was.
Give me some bonus.
Yeah.
I thought that's where you were going with that. I was scared. You almost stole my pick for the first time in the draft.
Oh, yeah. All right. After that, you know, it's getting to a point where I keep going by him, and I can't keep letting it happen. It seems like maybe we've been waiting a little too long for, you know, maybe some personal biases or whatever. But, you know, another guy that's been here before, another fan favorite, I'm going to take DeMar DeRozan.
Okay. I got 3 guys left.
3 guys left on the board.
This is my last pick. Last guy that I get to pick. So, let me look this out. So we got my options are between Drew Holiday, Julius Randle, and Siakam. Oh, wow. This is a tough choice. All these guys, obviously, some of the best players in the game.
Banning, if you're in my head right now, I'm hoping you get out of it because I need one of these guys on my squad.
Well, you get one of these guys, right? I get two of them. And
You
I
can
don't
do
want one of these.
Yeah, well,
So
the problem is I need one of these guys. So I'm really hoping you don't take my guy right here.
I don't really want any of them, but we'll take. Honestly, I was thinking Siakam, but Julius Randle's had a better year. I'll take him.
All right, we escaped from you taking my guy. Julius Randle's a great pick, but my guy, we'll keep it simple. I want Siakam. I need another big on my bench, and maybe he can hit his signature spin move over and over again and lead us all the
Yeah.
way. This doesn't seem right that this is your last pick, man. Like, I know, say what you will about Holiday. You might not like him as an all-star. I think he totally deserves to be here. But, last pick is almost disrespectful for the vet.
No, it's not because he shouldn't be here. James Harden is seventh in the MVP ladder, and he's not on here. 25, leading the assist in the NBA with that 11 assists. Drew Holiday is a good player. Don't get me wrong. But James Harden, who might be on your team, depending on Jaylen Brown being injured or not.
Yeah, could be. Nah, I think, you got to talk to Adam Silver about that one. I think
I
they
will.
should
I'll call him up.
why can't two legends coexist? Why,
Who? Who?
the two legends. What Cole say?
Who?
Come on.
Yeah. Who's the two legends?
We're taking all-star reserve, second best player on the championship squad versus James Harden. I'm taking, it's been
Drew Holiday. Is that who you're talking about?
I'm saying.
Okay.
When are we going to get the narrative going? I was telling you months ago, hop on YouTube, when you're bored, late at night, hear me out, and put on some Drew Holiday highlights. Hear me out. It's going to be a game changer. And now he's in the All-Star game. He might drop 2 points, he might drop 0, but he made it.
He's not getting minutes. I'm not giving him minutes on my team. He's not stepping on the court.
Just because we drafted here does not mean you get to assume the role of, I don't even know who the West All-Star coach is.
Lay GM.
Oh, yeah.
LeBron's the coach. There's no coach.
Well, you are not Michael Malone, and LeBron will choose who gets minutes. I'm going to pull my Joe Mazzulla here. Everybody on my team is getting minutes, and my team is going to win. Simple as that.
I don't think so. I think Embiid and Jokic are going to give you problems. I think LeBron's going to dunk on you. I think John Morant's going to dunk on you. I think Anthony Edwards is going to dunk on you. I think Jared Jackson's going to dunk on you.
I think incorrect.
I think Drew Holiday's subbing in to make the game-winning shot.
Hey, what happened? You remember when Brown tried to dunk on Tatum? Tatum's sophomore year, rookie year. Tatum got that stuff right out of here. Like,
who won the game?
It is not going to happen.
Who won the game?
We don't even need to hit the paint. We don't even need to hit the paint. Luka and Kyrie, teammates in real life, teammates in the All-Star game. This is the All-Star game. They ain't going to pass it back and forth the whole time. They're going to take shots. We don't even need to touch the paint. Who's locking me up?
Yeah, but who won that game, though? When
I don't the Mavericks game, yeah, they lost. They couldn't shoot the ball.
Yeah.
I just it's funny that, we have a guy here, Kawhi, that obviously, won't be playing in this game. And I think, he might ask the question, who won the game against Philadelphia?
That is a good question.
Yeah.
That was a different year, though.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Kawhi's a good player, though. I would have picked him. I mean, there were a lot of guys that were hurt in this draft that I would have wanted. I think if Steph wasn't hurt, he would have been my first overall pick, but we had to pivot after that.
We had to make a lot of pivots in this draft. I think I think both teams are looking great. You got your big man supremacy, which I wish we could have avoided, but
No, you have Giannis.
I know, but we're gonna have to make it. We're gonna have to make stuff shake up a little bit. Jokic is known for playing horrible in the All-Star game. Maybe we'll have a chance.
Yeah. We'll see
All
what
right,
happens.
we'll we'll see what happens. I think it was a good
Uh,
draft.
oh yeah, I think that was good. So right into the next segment. Obviously, we talked about this a little bit last week, but we didn't know if it was going to happen or not. Well, we did, but we didn't know when it was going to happen, and eventually did happen. It might be a little weird since it came out last Thursday and he broke it on Tuesday, but we recorded it last Tuesday. So I want to go over it a little bit. And then it'll segue into a few other topics. LeBron passing Kareem. We talked about it a little bit last week and the GOAT status of LeBron. He's the greatest player of all time, in my opinion. And I mean, I'll go back and forth on anything. I know last week you started to admit he's getting closer, which a few years ago he wasn't far, but he wasn't there. He wasn't as close as he is now. So even though we had projections and stuff, I think seeing him finally pass it, I mean, you can project as much as you want. Until it happens, you never know. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about this.
If I can be honest with you, I think I'm done fighting now. You know, it. I think I'm gonna have to do the opt out for now. The opt out
Okay.
for now, where I'm gonna do the 1A, 1B thing with
He's not
MJ.
retired, so
Yeah, I'm gonna for until LeBron's done. I'm gonna do the opt out where I say, they're 1A and 1B. But when LeBron retires, if it could be tomorrow, it could be in 6 years. When LeBron's done, I think he's the GOAT for sure. And this is hurting me to say
this
right
is a
now.
great day.
You can see it in my face, but yeah, when Bron's done, he's gonna be the GOAT. And I'm literally getting hoarse in my voice. But I'm gonna do the opt out 1A 1B thing for now. But yeah, I'm not gonna fight it anymore.
So when you look at achievements, is this what put him over Jordan, or is it like what do you see?
So I think this on its own isn't yeah, it's a big deal, but this isn't big enough to make him better than Jordan necessarily. But the fact is, you look in the record books and you see LeBron next to pretty much everything already. But I think, having him as the all-time leading scorer in basketball, there's something about it that's all right, it's got to be undeniable at this point. He already achievement-wise, I know Jordan's undefeated. I mean, I've been a Jordan backer my whole life. I can tell you why Jordan has the argument. Undefeated. If he wasn't a crippling gambling addict, he would probably be 8-0.
Mhm.
He may, and I think you could argue this about LeBron too, but Jordan made teammates around him better. He's the pure reason why people even have Scottie Pippen in top 20 conversations or acknowledged Dennis Rodman. Without Jordan, those two guys are seen a lot differently in NBA history. I think Jordan, the idea is that if he played as long as LeBron, yeah, he would be better than LeBron. But I think I've come to a point where, maybe it's just me or maybe it's just the way I watch sports now, where longevity isn't just something that happens. It's, a positive in your career arc. And LeBron being able to have this longevity and, still as I think he's the oldest guy in the NBA, right? Him, Udonis are he's up
Yeah,
there.
Udonis Haslam's like 40, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, LeBron's point is LeBron's old as dirt and he's top 5 right now. And
Mhm.
Jordan, let's not talk crazy. Jordan was still good in his final seasons, but he wasn't playing how LeBron is right now. So I think I've come to a point where maybe this record in particular maybe encapsulates a bigger point that I've been thinking about. Longevity isn't something that just happens. It's a claim to fame of LeBron's. And so for now, he's 1B, but when it's all said and done, his records are only going to keep growing. There's only more potential for him to win championships. It's going to be awesome to see him play with Bronny one day. He's going to be the GOAT when it's all said and done, and I'll stand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I know one of the main arguments is that he didn't win every finals, but so my thing about that is would it have been better if he didn't make the finals? Like, I mean, if you say, well, he lost in all the finals, like should he have just not made the playoffs then? Would that be better for him essentially, even though in 3 of the finals. Every single finals that he lost against the Warriors, he led both teams in points, rebounds, and assists. His first finals that he made in 2007, the second best player was Ilgauskas. And you think he's going to win the finals in his, third, fourth year? I think the only hindrance to it is that Mav series. I think a lot of people can agree on that. But he still ended that series with 24, 8, and 6 with almost 2 steals. That's a pretty good stat line. And if you look at the rest of the team, like I know there's a big 3 there. No one else on the rest of that team even averaged over 10 points. It was just those 3 guys.
Yeah. Well, and also, one thing I want to say to that, and I love D-Wade, but like D-Wade's supposed to be good enough to, if LeBron's down, he plays up. And D-Wade had a good series, don't get me wrong. But I mean, and this is coming from someone that loves to do this with LeBron when we talk about him, it's not all LeBron's fault when he loses every single time. Like LeBron, I think in his finals history, has been the best player on either side in every single game except for like 4 of them. Not even every single series. Every single game except for, like 2 of them against the Mavs. That one game where Steph Curry went like insane, and maybe one of the KD games. Like every other single game has been the best player on the court. So I think, when it comes to regular season and counting stats, he has, he's by far the most impressive. And then when we actually take a deep dive into how he plays, when it matters in the championships, he's still that guy. So, yeah, this is really hurting my feelings right now, but, I've come to admit it.
Yeah, that last series after Kyrie left in that 2018 finals, 34, 9, and 9, he led both teams in points, rebounds, and assists. He's playing with guys like J.R. Smith, and obviously Kevin Love was still there. Kevin Love is the Cavs legend, could be the best player in franchise history, depending on who you ask. There's still some people who don't necessarily feel.
People got to get out.
There's some people who still don't love LeBron.
That is ridiculous.
He does have the longevity stats for them, though. I would say he's definitely top 3. He's he's a Cavs legend. Yeah.
Oh my, yeah. I mean, by far, Kevin Love's a Hall of Famer. I'm not going to talk too crazy, but best Cav ever. I mean, LeBron, he's the chosen one. LeBron's one of the only dudes that could come back and be more loved than his first time there. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, he's for a guy that was billed up as probably the most anticipated athlete of all time to exceed expectations that's just amazing. He's had pressure on him his whole career, and he has never shied away.
Highest expectations out of any athlete ever, and he's done everything you could ask. Like I can't really think of anything that's not on LeBron's resume at this point. I love Jordan. I'm still gonna have him up there, especially for now. But
no one's saying he's not the 25th best player of all time.
Yeah. We're not arguing between only one of them is good, but I think if you put a tally box next to LeBron's name, you could pretty much check off every tally.
So we'll go right into this. Our top 5 players of all time. I'll start with you. If you want, I know 1A and 1B, so I'm guessing you'll have 4. Start with number 4, because unless you want to have 6 guys.
No. I got 5 guys.
Okay.
I'll go from bottom to top. I mean, and we don't have to go back and forth. I'll just say it. Number 5, I have Shaq, and then I'll just get this out the way. It was in between Shaq and Magic. I think for the longest time I had Magic above Shaq, but as I look back on it, I think a lot of Shaq's like points per game, like average season-wise stuff is screwed up based off his last couple seasons or whatever. When you actually look and individually see how he's played every single year, he's the most dominant big man ever. You're going to see the rest of my list, and I don't think he's the best big man ever, but he was actually unstoppable, and that's coming from a dude that couldn't shoot. I think we see modern day dudes that are unstoppable, and they all have jumpers. Shaq could not, take a shot 15 feet away from the rim or farther, and he was still one of the best players ever. So, Shaq or Magic, you can flip a coin on it. I'm going to roll with Shaq for this list for the sake of it. Number 4, I have Kareem. I know LeBron just beat him out, and he was pretty salty. But, he's just, I guess besides LeBron now, he's the best scorer ever. He, led championship teams. He revolutionized the game. His ability to get to the bucket while still being probably like a top 3 defensive player of his time is unmatched. I mean, he had his early years in Milwaukee, his later years in LA, and he was just more than, great in every single year. Number 3, this is where people want to get on my head, and this is where stuff goes bad when I start making lists. Number 3, I have Kobe. I know and I'll just get straight to it. We've talked about this before, maybe just some personal conversation or previous podcasts or whatever. After Kobe died, the trend was for people to put him really high on lists. And then a couple months later, it was a trend to put him really low on the list. And this is where, I have to take a step back and have to be, honest with myself and be honest about like what I care about in basketball. I think in general, one of the things that, it's not going to be on paper, and some people that are really into sports really hate this. I think the eye test is so important. And eye test wise, he just was a winner. If I had to give the ball with 5 seconds left to any player to ever exist, I'm giving it to Kobe. He just knew how to score in the big moments. He knew how to play. People said he was selfish. In my opinion, he knew how to play with others. Him and Shaq made it happen despite their off the court stuff. I just think genuinely he's one of the best players to ever pick up a basketball. And maybe his stats won't reflect that, or, his early years and his later years were both shaky. I don't really care. I think Kobe is, he reflected Jordan a lot. He didn't quite become Jordan, but, he's the closest to Jordan we're ever going to get. And then 1A, 1B, Bron and Jordan. Ask me in, 2026, 2027, when LeBron's actually retired, I'll probably give you LeBron number 1.
All right. So to start my list, you kind of talked about your number 5 and number 6, the first guy off. My first guy off at number 6 is Kobe. So a bit kind of a contrast to yours. My number 5 is Tim Duncan, which might come to a surprise to many people, but we've personally talked about this a lot. A guy like Tim Duncan, I think since he wasn't the most marketable player, I guess he went out there, played basketball, the big fundamental. And for a guy that pretty much averaged 20 points almost every single year, 2-time MVP, 3-time finals MVP, 15 all-NBA teams, 15 all-defensive teams, 5-time champion, insane, especially not even he wasn't the scoring guy on his team. Obviously, he's playing with that big 3. And then obviously Kawhi later in his career too. But I think a guy that gets really overlooked just because he's not flashy, he's not in your face highlight guy, just really overlooked in my opinion. Number 4, I have Magic Johnson. I think a guy who is seen as probably the greatest passer of all time, kind of revolutionized that point forward position, which now we see guys like LeBron. I'd say Magic was a little more of a traditional point guard than a guy like LeBron. Obviously, he was more of a forward, but just an amazing player too. We didn't get to see his full career pan out, obviously, because then I think he might be a little higher. But my top 3, at number 3, I have Kareem, a guy who is, I think a lot of people would agree that he is at top 5. I know you don't have him in his top 3, but a lot of people do have him in the top 3. I think top 4, pretty much everyone. If someone has him outside of the top 4, in my opinion, unless you give me like a really strong argument, I just can't see it. He's a guy that I'm really glad is in the spotlight now.
Yeah, he's a unanimous top 5. There's no way to get around that.
I think, there's a lot of people that I've seen claiming that he's the best player of all time. I don't think that's ridiculous. He has the stats. He was unguardable during his time. And he's obviously one of the best players of all time. My top 3, I think you could all argue are the best player of all time. And after that, I don't really know. But number 2, I have Jordan. Number 1, I have LeBron. We just obviously talked a lot about both of them. But I think out of those top 3 guys, any of them, in my opinion, you could argue as the best player of all time. But after that, I don't really see anyone else having an argument.
Yeah, I think we feel very similar about these players. Like, I think one thing is when you ask people to make a top 5 NBA list, it's very hostile, very quick. You know, I'm not going to be corny and say, oh, let's just recognize greatness, because I think it's important to have fun and categorize stuff like this. But at the end of the day, these guys are all legends. If your order is slightly different than one of ours, for the most part, I don't think you're stupid. I think there's going to be biases no matter who you pick or where you put them. I got the Kobe bias. There's some people that could say you have a Tim Duncan bias, even though I don't personally think so. I think you gotta have fun with your list sometimes while being realistic, and I think both of us achieved that.
Yeah, I mean, top 5 all time. There's so many players in history, and I mean, there's going to be guys that we could see depending on how these careers go. For a guy like Steph Curry, you never know. A guy like Giannis is pretty high up already in his career. A guy like Jokic too, which I could really see Jokic ending up like a Tim Duncan. Guys that everyone knows they're really good now, but in 30 years, you're not going to no one's going to, when you have highlight tapes of guys like LeBron, Steph, and KD in this era, and obviously in a few years when they're all gone, you're going to have guys like Ja and Anthony Edwards. The Jokic highlight tape might fall down a little bit, but I mean, seeing him now and then looking at the achievements, I really see him being like a guy like Tim Duncan, who's going to have all those achievements. And depending on the championships, if he can get a few in his career, would definitely be a top 10 guy at this point.
Yeah, I think just a quick comparison I'd make there. I think people look, and there's going to be people who maybe have my same logic of the eye test thing. They'll put a guy like Iverson over a guy like Tim Duncan. And I think, personally, I think it's ridiculous, but at the same time, I can understand it. And I think we might be getting into conversations between like Ja and Jokic. I think that's sort of a similar deal. So just something to think about as we go forward.
So to talk about this, the trade deadline, we had a big trade obviously go down, Kevin Durant to the Suns, and a big trade indeed. The Nets getting Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and 3 first and a first round swap. And then Suns getting TJ Warren too. You can do what you want with that, but losing a guy like Mikal Bridges is big, but obviously Kevin Durant is worth the price.
Yeah, I think here's how I feel about this, I guess. I think a lot of people were, unhappy with, this KD trade because I feel like, I don't know, some people might say the Nets, didn't get enough. Some will say they gave up too much. My thing is that, I feel like it was actually a fair trade. I think both teams benefit from this greatly. It wasn't the Nets' time. Clearly your Kyrie, James Harden, KD thing didn't work out. It becomes time to move on. And in order to move on, you've got to get assets. You've got to get picks. You can't just do nothing, or else they would be in mediocrity for the next 10 years. You have to make a move at some point. And this KD still has really great value right now because he's still top 5 in the league. And for the Suns, I feel, very similarly, but in the exact opposite directions. If you're Phoenix, you can't just be happy being a Western Conference Finals team every year. It comes to a point where it's like, it doesn't matter if you don't win. So, we've seen before that good teams acquire Kevin Durant and get better. Sure, he's a little older now. Sure, you may not have the cast of, a 2015 Golden State team, but, he fits all the requirements to get you to a playoff push or a finals push, I should say. And I think he makes you a favorite off the rip. So I think either way you look at the trade, you ask me, it's a good trade.
Yeah, on paper, this makes the Suns the best team in the West. I know the Nuggets are having a lot of success right now, but on paper,
if we're talking
Kevin Durant
paper,
to the Suns,
the Suns are wipe anyone else by far.
Yeah, right now, I don't know if there's really any teams that can compare that much to having a guy like Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, and the center, Ayton. Yeah, I almost said Bam Adebayo. They both kind of.
If they had Bam Adebayo, that team would win 70 games.
Yeah, Chris Paul said a few years ago after the finals that he's been it was kind of like a drug for him. Now he's addicted to being in the finals, and I know he's been 2 years sober now, but we'll see if this can change a little bit. The Suns have to make the finals. There's no if they don't make the finals, if they don't win the championship, this is a disappointment. And I know we saw the Kevin Durant and Kyrie stuff, and I mean, I'm not one to defend that team because they had a lot going on, but off the court there was a lot going on too, and obviously you can't really expect that team to be at full strength and win a championship when they've only played 20 games together or whatever it was, something like that. And Kevin Durant pretty much put his team on the back against the Bucks, putting 40 points almost every game, a half inch away from changing the whole NBA dynamic for years. But
sure.
I mean, now it's changed. He's on the Suns, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, to cut it to the next, I mean, D'Angelo Russell and Vanderbilt to the Lakers. Me personally on this, I'd like to hear your opinion. I guess when you look at it on paper, I'm like, wow, how did the Lakers finesse this trade? This is a great trade. But if you think about it in a grand scheme thing, you're giving up another pick. I know it may not be the most valuable pick. If you're not making the playoffs, I mean, yeah, you have a good roster. Your roster got better, but you are marketing more and more of your future every day, it seems like. Like if the Lakers can't win with LeBron, AD, and, this now good supporting cast of, characters, like you're wasting more and more of your future every day. Like you don't this this is a team that's not going to exist in 2030. You don't have these future guys that you can project. So I think it was a good trade, but it makes me worry about the Lakers even more. I want to hear your opinion on this one.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Lakers games this year, and the other night, I guess last night now, getting blown out by the Blazers. Not a good look, especially with Anthony Davis playing, LeBron not playing. D'Angelo Russell, like you said, you look at it kind of like, oh, how'd they finesse a guy like D'Angelo Russell? But they're going to have to they made this mega trade in the summer. They're going to have to pay Karl Anthony Towns. They're going to have to pay Rudy Gobert. And I mean, they're doing the strategy of me in the All-Star game. They're just going to put 5 centers out there at the court at some point. D'Angelo Russell, I don't think he fit in their timeline on what they're trying to build right now. So I don't think they had a huge problem shipping him off to the Lakers. But like you said, the Lakers have to make the playoffs, and they're in a tough spot right now because, I mean, they're far behind with the first half of the season not going the way that they wanted. But the West is so open right now. Besides the top few spots, everyone else, I mean, they're like, 6 or 7 games behind like the 4th seed. And a team like the Kings, which is really good right now, they're having a hot season. If you put the Kings in the playoffs against the Lakers, against LeBron and Anthony Davis, and this team clicks, it's going to be a good series.
Yeah. I mean, just like, I'm going to try to be, in the middle here a little bit, but I got to say, I agree with you with everything you just said, but when am I going to acknowledge this Lakers team isn't that good? I feel like we keep giving the Lakers excuses, and it's not even like a LeBron thing because he's having an amazing year. It's not even necessarily an AD thing because when he's healthy, he's playing really good so far. But like, there's got to be some changes, I guess. I guess if you consider this trade deadline a change, like a big change, sure, maybe you could reason with yourself with that. But this team isn't that good. If they make the playoffs, they have a chance. But if you're the 13th, I've never in my entire life watching sports, we can say basketball specifically, see people vouch for a 13th seed so hard. I don't know. If they make the playoffs, sure, anything can happen. But I don't think we need to pretend like this is a playoff team just because they have good players. Whatever you attribute it to, I don't think they have anything going this year.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of the team, I don't think the supporting cast is that good. You have Rui Hachimura as a starter, and I like him as a player, but
he wasn't even one of the better. I like Rui a lot, but he wasn't even one of the better starters in Washington.
And Dennis Schroeder as your main point guard, he's a good player again, but compared to like LeBron and Anthony Davis, those two are here. The rest of the team, they don't have that like third guy, which D'Angelo Russell could be, but we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it happened.
So a few more trades that I want to talk about. the Clippers, I'm going to pile this all together, loading up Mason Plumlee, Eric Gordon, and your guy, Bones Highland.
Yeah.
Just to talk about this a little bit, I saw Charles Barkley talk about it the other day. They have a problem right now in not having a point guard on the team. Terrence Mann is essentially their starting point guard, and he's not really a point guard.
Yeah.
And Bones Highland is good, but he's not like, if you're in the finals, he's not your starting point guard. You're not giving him the ball every possession to bring up the court, in my opinion, at least. I know he's a good player, but he's really young to have that pressure on him. They don't really have that guy right now. They have Paul George who can carry the ball up and Eric Gordon, but it's essentially just a bunch of shooting guards on a team right now.
Yeah. And I'll just try to get through this quick. I mean, I don't have a ton of comments on the Clippers side. I think, generally those were some good trades, and you load up and you try to win a chip with PG and Kawhi. And moving on from John Wall was something that needed to happen. It just wasn't going to work out. I think from the Nuggets side, it's just disappointing. Yeah, I'm a Celtics fan, but I really do vouch and root for the Nuggets. I had them as championship favorites. But, there were really days where I watched pretty much all the Nuggets games. There's days you watch and Bones Highland is the second best player. And although he's not consistent and, you have Jamal Murray and you have to worry about paying Bones at some point, 2 second-round picks is not something that you can justify. That's not a trade that was worth it. And it almost feels like, they were selling themselves short. I think I'm going to jump on this a little early because we have the buyout market in here. They got Reggie Jackson, which, fills a backup point guard spot. But Bones really projected to be something special. And, I really like him, but personally, I don't necessarily see that happening while he's a member of the Clippers. He's behind too many guys.
Yeah. Like you were talking about, I guess we can go into the buyout market. We have a few guys, Westbrook, we're talking about teams that kind of need a point guard. We could see him go somewhere like that. John Wall, which is interesting. He got traded to the Rockets pretty much a day after. He's like, yeah, that's the worst experience I've ever had in my life. Reggie Jackson, we just talked about. Will Barton, who is still out there. Danny Green, who just got signed to the Cavs, which I think is a good move for them. And then a guy like Pat Bev, who's got traded to the Magic. And I love Pat Bev. And I was sad to see him leave the Lakers because I think he was obviously he reminds me of pretty much like a Draymond Green kind of guy. You never say he's the best player on the team, but he's the glue guy. And I think I watched a lot of Lakers games this year, and he was on every single possession out there saying something, talking to the rookies on the sideline. My favorite play from him this season, obviously bringing the camera over to the refs, probably the best technical that I've ever seen. That was just, I love to see that. But a lot of teams that are looking for guys right now, and I think any of these options are good. Westbrook could go to a team like the Clippers because he doesn't need to be Westbrook on that team. He just needs to go out and play basketball. He doesn't have the expectations that he had when he got traded to the Lakers.
Yeah. I see that too. One thing, and cut me off early, Westbrook hasn't been bought out yet, correct? He's still on the Jazz.
Yeah, as of this.
Yeah, as of our recording. If the Jazz want to stick it out with him, I don't necessarily think that's the worst idea ever. The Jazz have kind of, obviously they've taken a step back again. They're not the most talented roster, but they've kind of played themselves out of, the Victor Wembanyama race. If you want to try to make a play-in push, Westbrook could run the point guard on that team and find some success. At the end of the day, it would be nice to see him team up with these studs and have him, make a championship push. But if he can have the ball in his hands more often and play, with guys that he fits well with, I'd like to see him succeed in Utah. I think it's fun to look at the buyout, but, he's towards the end of his giant contract, which is, why we're even thinking about him being bought out in the first place. If the Jazz want to let it rock, before, they either decide to fully tank or, try to load up, I'd like to see him play in Utah, honestly.
Yeah, for a guy like him, there's a lot of different opportunities, and I think Utah would be a good place for him to go. But I think he still could be a guy on a playoff team, and I think that's kind of what he's looking for right now. But if he want to stay in Utah and kind of I mean, they're obviously a playoff team, but I think he's kind of looking more towards like a team like the Clippers who could make a deep, deep run. Um, if there's anything else you want to talk about this trade deadline, feel free. I think we kind of
No.
went over most of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some other trades that it was cool. It's cool to see Sadiq Bey get moved, some other guys around that level. But, I think a big theme that we covered is that these are teams loading up. It's not a lot of, it's teams that we already knew had a chance getting even better. It's not a lot of teams that were in the race dropping out of it. It's either improvement from the good ones or, acknowledging that you're not going to be very good this year from the worst teams, which I think that's the best type of trade deadline.
Okay. So, kind of just to wrap up this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about UFC 284 that happened this weekend. We'll start with the third, right before the co-main events. We had a fight between Jack Della Maddalena defeating Randy Brown. This was a very fast fight, and especially for a guy like him, beating Randy Brown, which is a good fight, first round submission is very good, especially for ranking wise for him. And then to move on, we had Yadier Rodriguez facing Josh Emmett for the interim championship as Volkanovski went up in weight and tried to be a double champ. But Rodriguez winning this fight, this was a great fight, especially in the first round. Rodriguez just had his kicks just on a different level. He was out there and he was just beating up Emmett, just keeping him far away. A lot taller opponent for Josh Emmett. And Emmett got in there. He was trying to fight inside because he knew Rodriguez had those legs and those kicks fighting from both sides. But Emmett did put up a good fight. There was a point in the first round where I thought that Emmett was going to have a finish. He knocked him down, but Rodriguez locked him in that submission in the second round, and it was over. And then a bit of a controversial fight in the main event, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, the number 1 and number 2 pound for pound fighters. Volkanovski going for his champ recognition and moving up in weight class. But Makhachev just had control pretty much all of the fight. And there's a lot of people upset about the decision just because the whole debate about having control and just kind of because you can pretty much sit on your opponent for 5 minutes in a round and you win the round. But a guy like Volk who went in there and in the last round almost knocked Makhachev out because looking at this on paper, Makhachev was the better wrestler, better grappler, better submission, but Volkanovski just had the better hands. And if they stood up the whole fight, Volk definitely had a big chance, and we saw that in the fifth, but it was just a little too late. And it was a great fight overall. Today, the official rankings came out, and they have them as 1A and 1B in the pound for pound ranking. And some people a little upset, which is kind of weird considering a lot of people said Volk should have won the fight, but then people being upset that they're 1A and 1B when Islam won. It just kind of goes depending on where you look, because there's a lot of UFC purists which are like, oh, well, if you have the 2 top guys fighting and one guy won, obviously he should be number 1. But there's a lot of people that wanted to see Volk win just because Makhachev isn't the most exciting fighter to watch when you consider that most of his fighting is just grappling and submission. And a lot of people just like to see 2 guys stand up and kind of punch each other and kick each other. But overall, very good card. And we'll see a lot of big fights coming up soon that we'll talk about. John Jones returning soon. McGregor returning this summer, which is kind of a little farther off. But those are just my quick initial thoughts about that.
Yeah, and I checked out the Makhachev fight. I thought it was. I mean, I'm not the expert. I'm definitely not the guy you should go to in this scenario, but I think it was a good fight. I think Makhachev. I agree with the decision. But yeah, I think that was some good commentary. While you were up, I made it out of Philly. Looks like I'm in San Francisco. Can't really tell. I'm guessing San Francisco. Look at the bridge.
Yeah, that's a Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah. I've been before. It's beautiful. So I'm happy to be here again.
Oh yeah. I think overall, obviously we have the All-Star draft that went through this episode. We had some great debates about the greatest football player of all time, Patrick Mahomes, and the greatest basketball player of all time, LeBron James. And obviously recapping the Super Bowl. Had a lot we talked about this week, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, it was a big week. Thank you, guys.